My Essential Birth Black Friday deals are live. Right now, you can grab the My Essential Birth course and get our exclusive birth affirmation cards download, belly mapping guide, and bonus meditation track, only available through this offer. And you can bundle and save by adding the postpartum course, plus get 2 more bonuses, which is our postpartum affirmation audio track and belly binding tutorial for you and your birth partner. Head to myessentialbirth.com and get started today.
Let me tell you, when I got those op reports, I was reading them. I broke down and I was angry. I had all these feelings like wrapped up in a ball, and it was just like sitting in my gut. My husband was like, "You know differently now. You can't blame yourself for what we didn't know then. We just have to move forward and change this next experience." And I really think that is such a good tip. Like, learn from your experience, grow from your experience, and change your next experience.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are 2 of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Welcome to this week's podcast. You guys, I have a special guest and I will introduce her in a moment, but I do want to start with that reviewer of the week. So this one is from Glam Girl for Life. She says, "I can't thank this podcast enough. I started listening to this podcast when I was around 30 weeks pregnant and listened whenever I had free time in the car, shower, washing dishes, etc. I'd been told by pretty much everyone that I wouldn't be able to have an unmedicated birth because of my extremely low pain tolerance. But this podcast gave me the mental strength I needed to achieve that, even in a scary situation. I ended up going to the hospital at 34 weeks, 2 days after waking up with a placental abruption. And for those of you that don't know what that might be, it's where your placenta tears away from the placenta wall and there's bleeding and all kinds of scary stuff that happens. She says, I ended up going from 3 centimeters to birthing my baby in 3 hours with no epidural. Listening to these podcasts and birth stories mentally prepared me in such a short amount of time. I had my baby in July 2023 and still listen to this podcast. I cannot stop recommending this podcast to every pregnant person I know." Thank you. What a crazy story, too. You're not alone. In fact, I'm really excited for Meagan, who is here with me today to tell her story because she's got some really interesting stuff in the background here. But with that, let me give a quick intro and then I'll have you kind of jump on and say hello and talk to everybody yourself too. But Meagan is a friend of mine. We found each other within the birth community and we've kind of been in touch ever since. And so that's been such a blessing. But she's also a wife and a mom of 3 and a birth doula. Her birth stories are what has brought her to where she is today. After having 2 cesareans that were unnecessary, she made it her mission to discover what options she had. After learning more about VBAC and then having her own VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans, she and a friend started the company and podcast called The VBAC Link. Meagan shares stories from women all over the world every week, as well as has expert guests share more about their options on birth and VBAC. And we've had her on here before, so I feel like this is awesome because we're kind of coming full circle. We talked about VBAC and a bunch of that kind of stuff last time. This time, we get to drill into her a little bit more about her personal stories, and which is also VBAC related and pretty heavy, pretty awesome stuff. So with that, Meagan, say hi to everybody and tell me anything that I missed or anything that you want to say hello.
Well, you didn't miss anything. You didn't miss anything. I really appreciate it so much. I love you and adore you so much. So it's so fun to always reconnect and be on the podcast again. Everyone talks about like, why did you become a doula? Why are you so passionate about VBAC? And I'm like, well, honestly, it's just because of my own personal experience. Like, I think that's where a lot of us go from, right? Being passionate about a certain topic because maybe we've had a less ideal experience before. And like you said, I had 2 unplanned and undesired cesareans. And that's sometimes hard for me to like think about. Like, I kind of get grumpy because I'm like, no, I didn't want those. But I also am very grateful for those because it's really what brought me here today to learn and to grow and to inspire women all over the world. So with my first C-section, I was the most uneducated person that you could probably think of. Really, though. I downloaded an app, found out I was pregnant, downloaded an app, and let that app tell me exactly what I was going to experience that week, how big my baby was, and whatever else it said. Not a lot of education, right? That's just really the fact. It didn't tell me a lot of things that I should be expecting through labor and how I should be preparing and questions for my providers and, just all the things that these birth courses out here in this world give us. I think it is so important to know that education is, if not one of the most important tips that you could have for birth. And that's not just VBAC. That is for any birth. And even if you've had 3 babies, you should be refreshing on birth and understanding how it's changed or what other options you have. And I just didn't do that. So when my water broke, I just ran off to the hospital because that's what I was told to do. And that's what mainstream media tells us to do. I mean, that I don't know. That just how it was. And so I did. I went to the hospital and they were like, well, you're not really dilated and you're not really contracting. So let's make that happen. And they induced my labor. And I was so uneducated. I was young. I was maybe naive. And I was just like, okay, whatever you say. And unfortunately, that did lead me down the path of being wheeled down to the OR and laying there strapped to a table in a cold, bright room, listening to providers talk about how grumpy they were that the weather was changing. And then all of a sudden my baby was born. And it sucked. There was a disconnect for me. I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling. I thought I was supposed to feel happy and full of joy and emotional, and I just didn't feel those things. And it got to the point where when I was laying there, my husband had walked away with my daughter because they had taken my daughter over. And I was telling myself, just cry right now. Make yourself cry. Like you're supposed to cry. And I just really didn't have much to give. And I knew that after that experience, I didn't really want that again. And I needed to do better for myself. And I deserved to really change my experience, right? So I did. I started educating myself on my options. And I kept hearing this word VBAC. I'm like, what is VBAC? Like, I don't even know what that means. And then finally I found out vaginal birth after cesarean. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. I think I want to do this. And I started, reading blogs and finding information and realizing just how possible VBAC was. And at 36 weeks, I wanted to hire a doula. And I was having this feeling that maybe I should change providers, but I didn't because I didn't want to break up with my provider. Apparently we were dating. That's how I felt, I guess. And so I didn't. Right? Like, can you understand? Like, there's so many people that we hear stories where they're like, I just couldn't leave my provider, but they didn't support them. And it's like, why do we feel like we can't leave them? I just felt like I owed him something. And I don't understand that, but I didn't leave. And my husband and I got in a little tiff about hiring a doula. He did not agree with my choices of hiring a doula. One, he said they were expensive. You guys, let me just tell you, she quoted us $500 back then. $500. Apparently that was too much. I mean, looking now, I'm like, that is like a free doula. Understanding what doulas do. It was just really cheap, but he just, we weren't in a spot. And then he didn't understand. He felt like he was going to be replaced. And that was unfortunate. I didn't want him to feel that way. That's not what a doula is. Just want to break that myth right there. Doulas do not replace their birthing partners, but we didn't hire a doula and my water broke again. I went in much more like I took a lot more time, but I was still not contracting, kind of felt bullied into this position of going in. And when I got there, my nurse was a doula and she was amazing. Oh my gosh, she was amazing. We were doing all the things and then her shift ended and everything changed. The attitude, the environment, there was a shift and I felt it and my body responded. And that sucked. My provider came in and was pretty much like, this isn't going to happen for you. He told my husband to tell me to wake up and smell the coffee, like to just get a grip pretty much and go down and have a C-section. And I remember begging for just one more hour to make a change. Or I don't even know what I was begging for an hour. Like I didn't even know in my head what I thought 1 hour would do for me. But I felt that was the one thing, right, that I learned along my education is it was ask questions, ask for more time. It's okay to do that, assuming that everyone's okay. So I did, and nothing really happened. I feel like the contractions ran away. They just stopped. I never really felt them anymore and walked down for a second repeat cesarean that I did watch in a mirror, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't think I could do that. But for me, it's what brought healing and comfort, and I felt involved in that birth. And so even though it was undesired and unplanned, it felt healing. It felt comforting to know that I was really being involved in my own birth in a matter that I wanted to be involved. And it brought a lot of healing. But after that, that's when I started diving even deeper to VBAC because I was like, I really don't want I knew I wanted another baby, but I knew I did not want another C-section. So that's kind of where a lot of my passion started growing even deeper as a doula client because I became a doula after that. And as a mom wanting to know VBAC information.
I feel like that is a lot to unpack, and that's a lot for any one woman to have to take on. I know that we have both shared our stories in person with each other before, but we share a lot of similarities, unnecessary stuff, providers talking in the cesarean room, just I don't know. There's so much there, and even the water breaking and the induction stuff. And I'm curious, I have a couple questions. So with that first one, how many weeks were you when that water broke?
Yeah. So my first one, you're going to laugh at all the coincidentals of these dates, but 39 weeks, 4 days is when my water broke and I had my baby because it was later night to day, 39 weeks, 5 days.
Okay. And when you went in, were you having contractions before you went in? Did you have any contractions? My Essential Birth Black Friday deals are live. Right now, you can grab the My Essential Birth course and get our exclusive birth affirmation cards download, belly mapping guide, and bonus meditation track, only available through this offer. And you can bundle and save by adding the postpartum course, plus get 2 more bonuses, which is our postpartum affirmation audio track and belly binding tutorial for you and your birth partner. Head to myessentialbirth.com and get started today.
Barely. I was barely having contractions. I kept telling my husband, I think I have to poop before we go. And he was like, okay. And then I'd go and I'd sit there and then they'd go away. And then in the car, I was like, I have to poop again. But really it was just contractions. And I just didn't know what to expect. Right. And it was more rectal, which coincidentally enough, that's how all my babies were. But yeah, I was barely contracting.
Okay. So when you went in, what was the process? Did they vaginal exam immediately on Pitocin?
Yeah. So they did a vaginal exam and I was 1.5, 2 centimeters. And I was which to me seemed really good, but it wasn't really doing much. And so they're like, oh, we'll just let you weigh. And then after so long, they were like, it's not working. Your body's not doing it. We have to have a baby. Let's get you on Pitocin. And so then they induced my labor.
Okay. And when they induced your labor, how were Pitocin contractions for you? And did you end up getting an epidural? And how long did that
Yes.
process take?
Yes, such good questions. So, yes, they started Pitocin and wow, I was like, what is happening? I definitely started feeling things quite quickly. And again, I was very unprepared. I did not know what my body had to even do to get a baby out other than reach 10 centimeters. I didn't know anything about effacement. I didn't know anything about stations, baby positioning, anything like that. I just knew 10 centimeters and I was going to have a baby. So yeah, I got an epidural because I was literally clinging to the bed like this, telling my husband, do something, do something. I'm in so much pain, do something. And he was like, epidural. And I was like, no epidural. And he was like, that's the only thing that's going to help you. So I got an epidural, and I feel like as soon as I got that epidural and got that catheter, it was kind of like, oh, well, let's just bump it right up. And so they started really ramping up the Pitocin, but they didn't even do it for very long. I need to go look. I have my timeline, and it's, at this point it was 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago. And so it's a little skewed, but I want to say it was like 11 or like probably 10 or 11. And they checked me and I was like 3 centimeters. So to me, I was like, great change. But then by like noon, I still was only 3 centimeters. And my baby had a couple decelerations, but nothing too concerning. And so they kind of threw that out there and like, oh, your baby's not very happy. And I'm like, okay, well, she looks really happy. She's still in the 160s over here. Like, all is well. But it just came down to, well, it's been 12 hours since your water broke. You've been on Pitocin for this long. Your baby's had a couple decelerations. It's not going to happen. Your body doesn't know what to do. We have to have a C-section. And so by noon that day, and my water broke literally like right before midnight, it was a cesarean. I was being wheeled down.
Yeah, that was my question, is how that cascade happened, and you explained that exactly. So
exactly. And, looking back now, knowing what I know and seeing the pattern, and I'm not saying this happens for everybody, but seeing a pattern within my own doula clients, I got that epidural and my baby had some decelerations. That does happen sometimes after an epidural. And then she was fine. She recovered. And so I don't know if like they were using those. Like, I don't know, like in my mind exactly when the timing happened, but I knew it was after I got an epidural that they were like, oh, your baby's had some decelerations. So it makes me always wonder, like, was that because of the epidural? Maybe I was dehydrated. My body wasn't responding super well, or that was its response, So, and I was getting really nauseous. That was another thing. I was really nauseous, which makes me think blood pressure. So,
right.
Yeah, it really was. As soon as that epidural came into play, it was like boom, 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 C-section. And I know that doesn't happen all the time, but it definitely was a part of my story.
Yeah. And something interesting about Meagan here, you guys that are listening, you actually, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit more, like how you use this information with your third birth, but you went back, and I remember you talking about this. You got your medical records from both of your C-sections, and you were like, let's go through them. Why? What did you put on there? What are right? Because we know, like as doulas, we're told, like when we take trainings and things, or childbirth educators, right? We're told like the number one thing that providers put on C-section charts, there's 2 things. It's failure to progress and CPD.
Yep.
Cephalopelvic disproportion. Failure to progress is, we know now, right? As anybody that's listening here, I want you to understand this is failure of your provider. It's patience, like a lack of patience on your provider's part. It is failure to wait. It is not failure to progress. Yeah. And the other one, CPD, is cephalopelvic disproportion, as they are saying that your pelvis is too small for your baby, which I cannot emphasize enough, that your body does not grow babies that it cannot birth. I'm just going to say that here, unless you have some kind of trauma to that area that makes it so you have some kind of deformed bone, ligaments, whatever, that something's like off in that area. Your body creates babies big enough for you to birth, small enough for you to birth, however you want to look at it, correct size for your body. So I kind of want you to talk about that. And I don't know if you want to do that now or after, but I want to hear kind of that same information, same questions for birth number 2. How many weeks were you and what did the process look like? Because your water broke and you went in. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. And talking about the op reports, I was told that I had CPD. I was told that my baby would never fit out of my pelvis. And that's actually what happened with my second. So I was 38 weeks, 5 days when I had my second daughter. So a whole week sooner, almost literally to the date and almost the time. Kind of crazy. So yeah, my water broke. I obviously went in and they refused to do anything on this one. I was begging for Pitocin. Let me just tell you, moms don't beg for Pitocin. I was begging. I was like, just give me Pitocin because I was 1 centimeter dilated, not really contracting. And I wanted to contract. I wanted to go into labor. I really believed that my baby could come out vaginally. I believe that my body could progress because I also was told, and it was documented, failure to progress. So yeah, I went in and they refused to do anything. I was begging for a Pitocin, a Foley, anything to help my labor, and nothing was given to me. It was all said that that's against protocol. VBAC can't be induced, which, guys, not true. Not true. But
there are certain things you cannot do that is not safe for mom to induce, but that does not mean, yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can at all. And Pitocin is not one of those contraindicated things that make it so VBAC's not possible. Now, does Pitocin slightly increase chances of rupture or complications? Yes, slightly. It's going to increase it because we are synthetically making our uterus contract. Like, we are putting a medicine into our body to make our uterus contract, but he would not give me anything at all. And that was really frustrating. So on that one, I wasn't diagnosed with CPD on that one. I was just diagnosed with failure to progress. But I was also, I wasn't diagnosed, but it said on my op report, elective cesarean, when I didn't want a cesarean at all. So
don't you love that? I love that you went back and got your reports. I love that because I don't even have mine. I'm like, I probably need to go grab that and figure out I'm so curious. But
yes, you should. And for anyone who's listening, know that they usually keep those for 6 to 8 years, depending on your hospital. And some of them hold them for longer, but sometimes they don't keep them in their file. So go get it. I had to go to medical records at my hospital. I did go to my doctor's office and he gave me the weekly checkups, like what my fundal height was, what my baby's heart rate was, like their notes, but I didn't have the medical records from my office itself. I had to go to the medical records department for them to give them to me.
Mine are probably gone then. But now I am curious. I am going to go look into
it. It's always worth asking. And I really do. I encourage anyone who's had a cesarean to have a better understanding what that provider said to you. And with my second C-section, words were said, which impacted it impacted me more for my VBAC than I ever imagined. But he said, as I was on the operating table, it is so good that you did not VBAC. You for sure would have ruptured. Those are the words he said to me. I had what's called a uterine window, which is just meaning that it was stretched and there was like a thinner layer. Okay, this can happen to people who don't even have cesarean, but it can happen and no one even knows, right? He just saw it. So I had a uterine window and he said those words, you would for sure have ruptured. For sure. And that stuck with me more than I ever knew it would.
And of course it would. And then to tell a mom something so serious like that at such a vulnerable state, they obviously are not thinking of that in the moment. At least I really hope they aren't, because that would be extremely like evil at that point to be actively understanding
Right.
what you're doing. But yes,
Mhm.
we're like, I just had a conversation with another woman about this, like how we are treated during labor is what sticks with us, the things that are said and all of that. So that's huge. This provider for the second, did you have the same provider, same hospital?
Yeah, same provider, same hospital. And I wanted to switch, but like I said, I was like so nervous. I just felt like I owed him whatever. I don't even know what I felt like I owed him.
Mm-hmm.
I owed him the birth. That is what I
Yeah.
felt like, which goodness, dang, that sucked. I shouldn't have to owe him my birth and my experience, especially because he wasn't there. He wasn't there to remember and hold on to my birth experience. He was there to just catch a baby. But yeah, same hospital, same provider, and coincidentally enough, the same provider that caught me in 1988
Whoa, that's
via
kind of cool
cesarean,
and a little
I should
crazy.
say.
Oh, no way. Oh,
Yeah.
Meagan.
Yep. Yep. And my mom was told her pelvis was too small with me as well, because apparently my big self at 7 pounds, 10 ounces, which coincidentally enough was my first baby's weight, it's too big.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Okay, let's move
Yeah.
on to the redemptive part of this story and like
Yes.
everything that makes you who you are today, honestly, and everything that you do. What changed for your next one? And like, what did that look like for you moving into this next birth?
Yeah. So what changed is my education. I had become a doula at this point, so I had learned a lot more, like even more than I thought I knew the second time with prepping for VBAC. So I learned a lot more. I had seen VBAC, which I think helped me a little bit. I had heard some more stories. There wasn't a ton of stories out there, hence the reason why we started the podcast. But I was hearing stories on like the Birth Hour and some other good podcasts. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So I had faith. I started preparing physically, and like I was working out. I was getting good nutrition, really focusing hard on protein and good healthy fats. I was processing mentally. I was getting those op reports. And let me tell you, when I got those op reports and I looked through them and I was reading them, I broke down and I was angry. I had all these feelings like wrapped up in a ball, and it was just like sitting in my gut. My husband was like, you know differently now. You can't blame yourself for what we didn't know then. We just have to move forward and change this next experience. And I really think that is such a good tip. Like, learn from your experience, grow from your experience, and change your next experience. And that is what I just felt so passionately to do. And then I decided to interview, actually before I was pregnant, 12 doctors. Maybe a little ridiculous, maybe to some. Wasn't for me. I really needed to find that provider that was going to be on board with me and aligned with me and up to date with evidence-based care that really wanted this for me, just like I wanted it for myself. And so I couldn't settle for the providers that were like, well, we could let you try, or, well, you could, but these are my restrictions, or, well, you couldn't get your baby out of your pelvis the first time and your body didn't dilate past a 3, but if you go into labor spontaneously, maybe it will happen, things like that. Or then I got the providers of, oh, I for sure, if you were my wife, I for sure wouldn't do this. It's like, so frustrating. So it took me 12 to find the right provider, but I found a great provider. And it's funny because I always say 12, but technically there was 13 because the 12th provider I hired, and I started care with him and it was amazing. Like, it was amazing. He was so warm and welcoming and was like, you're going to do this. He did use the VBAC calculator on me, which for anyone that doesn't know is a calculator online that they can type in your quote unquote stats and give you a percentage of what they think and what this computer thinks your success chance will be to have a vaginal birth. Oh, big eye roll. Let me just tell you, I do not like it at all. So it was used on me, but because I knew that the calculator just really wasn't anything, I just let it go. But yeah, I was within care. And then at 24 weeks, I switched to a midwife and I decided to birth out of hospital. So that was a big, big change and shift in anything that I'd ever done before. Because one, I was now committing to an unmedicated birth. Even though I wanted it, it was like a full commitment. Sometimes I feel like when you're out of hospital and there's literally no other option, it's like, it feels more real. I don't know why, but I really was committing to that. I was committing to an out of hospital birth experience. And yeah, I'd never gone the midwife route. And it was amazing. It was just the best. And I will forever cherish that experience and those days with this midwife, because I would go into these visits and she would just embrace me with her arms and, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What do we need to debunk? It was just like constant, like, let's fill you with positivity. Let's get rid of the junk and let's do this. And so, yeah, then the triumphant, beautiful VBAC after 2 cesareans happened after my water broke again at 40 weeks, 4 days, had my baby at 40 weeks, 5 days. So my longest pregnancy yet. And long labor, 42 hours of contracting. And it was hard. I had a posterior baby. Apparently that's how my babies like to enter my pelvis. After taking Brittany Sharp's pelvic dynamic course, I realized that I learned some babies have to actually enter the pelvis in a wonky position to navigate down through. And I believe that my babies have to go in posterior. I don't know why. It's whatever the shape of my pelvis is, that's how it happens. But I didn't have too small of a pelvis, you guys. I pushed him out in 2 contractions worth of pushes. And so probably 6, 7 pushes, and pulled him right out onto my chest, and just, wow, it was just amazing. It was that moment where I just said, I did it. And I was just screaming, and all my doulas who had been there surrounding me. And you know how my husband said no doula the second time? This time I had 5 doulas. Because I was
Yes.
in the birth. I was in the birth space and had doulas that are like, I just want to be at your birth. I just want to be there. Can I just come? And then I did hire a birthing team and I had some friends that were doulas. It was just so amazing. But yeah, after moving and grooving and trying to get this baby in a better position after my water broke, and being at 4 centimeters for a lot of hours, and then 6 centimeters for quite a few hours, I was feeling defeated in my labor. But that moment that I just pulled him up onto my chest and felt his squishy little body, and I didn't even hear him cry. He didn't really cry right away. He just was so calm, and everything in the world just felt right. I knew that everything that I had done leading up was what I had to do to get in that experience. And I will forever cherish it. And, going past even just mentally and physically prepping, there was so much more. Hiring that team, finding that right provider, following my intuition. Because with my other baby, I didn't follow my intuition. I didn't change providers. And, I think that this provider that I had would have been amazing, but I do believe that hospital policy would have trumped it at 42 hours, 36 hours of my water, being solidly broken, because it was trickling, but then solid broken, right? It probably would have been a cesarean.
As you were saying that, that's exactly what was going through my mind. That your out of hospital experience, vaginal birth, would not have happened in the hospital. That is my unprofessional, very honest opinion.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I really don't think that it would have happened. And I don't want to try to steer anyone away that's feeling hospital birth,
Totally.
away from hospital birth.
Yeah.
But the logistics of my birth just wouldn't have happened. I don't think it would have happened.
Yeah, I very much hold that same story and belief for my third. It was very much the same, where it was longer and I had periods of rest and just things that I don't think would have been afforded in a hospital, particularly as a VBAC. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm curious, at that 24-week mark, what changed? What was different for you? What made you decide to interview an out-of-hospital provider, and what made that switch?
Yes. Oh, such a good question. Again, I was a doula at this point, and I actually was attending a birth on Christmas Eve with a good friend of mine who was also at my birth. She actually took a lot of the photos that we have. And I was watching this midwife and watching my friend labor. And it's Courtney, my friend Courtney, our friend from our doula class.
I was going to ask you after if it was her. I didn't know if you wanted to say the name.
Yeah, it was. It was Courtney's birth. So a friend of ours' birth. I was there, and this midwife was just blowing me away. I had never really seen, and I had been out of hospital births before, but I'd never really seen the care that this midwife gave. And I feel selfish because in so many ways, I was there to help as a doula and be her support. But in so many ways, I was very stuck in my own space of like, oh my gosh, I want this. This is what I want. I want to chat with her. What questions? So I had to quickly stop that so I could be the good doula, and just stepped away and asked the midwife, hey, can I chat with you later after this? And she was like, yeah. So I let it go. But it was my experience of seeing this midwife and this out of hospital birth that was beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and absolutely what I wanted, that really made me switch. Because even though I love my provider and I really he was the VBAC doctor, I didn't feel what I saw and felt with someone else's birth, and couldn't even imagine that being me, my own self, So that is what kind of jump started me. And then in the mix of that too, understanding really how safe out of hospital birth is, and kind of having that be an extra comfort, as my education was furthering in that route.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Tell me a little bit about, since we're talking about 42-hour labor, and I'm sure people's ears perked up when they heard that too, wait a second, and is that even safe? And your water was broken and all that. So what was your experience as you worked through that? Were the contractions manageable? What did you do to work with them? What kind of different positions, or did you use water, anything like that? And then what was your midwife doing to make sure that you and baby were safe and you could continue to move on?
Such great question. So yes, my contractions were pretty manageable. They were on and they were off. And sometimes they would come and they were really, really strong. And I was like, oh, that was a good one. And then it would be manageable again, which was great. It was great to have manageable, but I wanted them to increase. So I would do things like pumping or walking or just resting. And my midwife was really big in follow your body. If it's not contracting, rest. That's what your body and your mind need. So I would do that. I also went to the chiropractor. I went and got adjusted, which was really great. And after I got adjusted, my contractions definitely picked up in a lot more, I wouldn't say active state, but consistent state. They really started getting more consistent. And then I ended up getting adjusted again later on, which I believe helped so much and really helped us get that baby in a better spot to come out vaginally. But yeah, they were consistent here for the most part, but very manageable until the I won't even say the very end. It wasn't like they were not manageable. They were just different. They were very strong and very progressive. I could feel my body doing what it needed to do. And I really welcomed that in. I worried that I would be fearful of them and hold back and tense up, but I didn't. I just kind of gave them. And I kind of laughed when your reviewer was like, a lot of people say I have a low pain tolerance, because my husband was like, you're not going to be able to do this. Your pain tolerance is so low. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. I feel I'm pretty tough. Maybe I'm vocal and I whine a little bit. That's probably a fact. But I really felt like I could do it. And so it was really cool to have that. And then what my midwife was doing along the way was doing consistent baby checks. She was getting a Doppler and checking on my baby. She really tried to avoid a lot of cervical exams. We did have cervical exams, but we didn't have a ton. And so we would do that. And then she was encouraging changing of space. And so that kind of goes in with the positional changes. So I would labor on the toilet backwards for a little bit. And then I would go back in the bed and lay down and rest because I was holding my whole body up on this toilet, right? Or she was like, go take a walk outside. So I left the birth center and I went walking around outside, which was so refreshing. One of my most precious moments of my labor was I was laboring underneath a sycamore tree. And I had a sycamore tree at my home with my doulas and my husband. And we were just laying there sipping on water and we were doing some abdominal lifts. I also did like the stairs sideways, doing like little lunges up the stairs, and really just was working. We did some rebozo. We really just were trying to encourage baby, but not force baby, because we wanted to trust baby that he would know where to go and when to do it. And when he did, I went from a 6. Well, I was like 4, and then I was like a 6, and I was there kind of there for a little while, and then I went from a 4 to a complete really quickly as soon as he rotated. And my baby was really low. So he was like +2, +3, like pushing. So he was right there, which was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure. But yeah. And then she actually did an NST out of hospital. We did an NST as I was sitting on the toilet because she was like, it's been a long time. I just want to make sure we're all good. She did an NST and she was like, your baby is too happy in there. Let's not worry about your baby. Let's get going, So yeah, we did a lot of things for out of hospital birth.
No, that's really awesome. And I'm like, you had time within your labor to see the chiropractor twice. And that's like so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, NST, and I know we've talked about them here before, but that's a non-stress test. So they're checking on babies' vitals and heart rate and all that kind of stuff while mom is having contractions, just to make sure that they're doing okay. That is awesome, Meagan. And then you do what you do today, which is VBAC link and talking to moms about safety of VBAC and encouraging moms to understand their options when it comes to VBAC. Do you want to talk about a little, just for a moment, just about your mission? Because I feel like now all these ladies have this awesome basis for like why it matters so much. But talk to me about your mission for a minute.
Yeah, my mission is to help people have better experiences. And, we're the VBAC link, so we're very heavily involved in VBAC. We want to talk VBAC, we want to preach VBAC, we want to help you understand what VBAC means, what the risks are, and all of that. But with that said, we also accept that not everyone wants a VBAC. And VBAC might not be the best choice, or unmedicated, or whatever, right? We love and support all types of birth. So my mission at the VBAC link is to make birth after cesarean better. And then in addition to that is we have a serious issue with a cesarean rate at 32%, 32.1%, I think in like 2023 was the most recent. So like a year ago, that's really high. So my mission is to help inform first-time parents and even second, third-time parents how to avoid unnecessary cesareans, what your options are. And so through that mission, that's where we come with a lot of the education, the blogs and the podcasts and the storytelling and offering professionals and encourage people to take birthing courses, because you guys, these things, they might add up in cost. They might add up in time. It may feel daunting, but it is so worth it, because you will look back at your experience and be like, I did everything that I could do, no matter how your experience ends up. And you're more than likely going to look back at it as a more positive experience because you did what you needed to do.
I love that. You and I are on a very similar mission. And I hope and pray that other women continue to jump on and have experiences that are so good that they need to share it with other people, because that's the only way it's going to happen. So grateful for what you do. I'm glad to have you here. We do have a couple of questions that came in from our audience that I want to hit you with real quick. And then for those who are listening, this is a new thing that we're doing. But after I'm done with a couple of these questions from Meagan, we're actually going to jump into some bonus session time with her after the podcast. And that's for all of our My Essential Birth moms. So if you are a My Essential Birth student, this is all the stuff that you're going to see coming at you on the back end. It is not there yet. We are creating a little bit of a library, but that'll be coming at you. So when you guys jump into the course, you'll get get even extra bonus time with Meagan and I. But a couple of the things that came in, and I love these questions. These are moms that you can tell they've had VBACs and they need to know. That first one, and this is a really common one, is there a certain time to get pregnant if you want to try for a VBAC? And one of the moms said, I was told to wait 18 months before I should even try. Is there evidence for this? Is it true? Are there risks to going a little bit quicker? What would you have to say to that?
Yes, this is easily one of the most common questions that we get in our inbox daily is how long should I wait? What's the evidence? And really the evidence varies a little bit, but statistically looking at the best evidence, it's around 18 to 24 months that you're going to be more likely to have like a healed uterus and a stronger uterus and less likely to rupture. But with that said, if you get pregnant at 14 months, if you get pregnant at 12 months even, that doesn't mean that you're just completely out of the question, unacceptable, not going to be able to be back. The rupture rates still are very low. I mean, they're literally like 0.4 to 1%, you guys, very low. And so looking at like a shorter duration or even like multiple cesareans going into like the 1.4, 1.5%, yes, it's increased a little bit, but still very small, very, very small. So yes, is it ideal to wait more? Yes. Do you have to? No. Something that I think I would even pay more attention to is just letting your body come back to normal before trying for a baby. But it's a personal choice. It is a very personal choice. With VBAC, you may have a harder time finding support if it is before 18 months. But again, advocate for yourself. It is possible.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that was important to say because that will, you'll need to know about your providers and who you're dealing with and specifically if that's an issue. But I will say for myself, both of mine were about 14 months after having the last one and 0 issues and happy VBAC. So definitely a personal decision. And I've seen women on both sides, having them much earlier, maybe planned or unplanned and totally safe and having them later.
Yep.
So personal choice. I agree with that totally. Here's another one for you. How much does the chance of uterine rupture increase with multiple VBACs?
Oh, yes. So we were just kind of talking about that. So, we're looking around a 1% uterine rupture rate, and it can increase with things like Pitocin and things like that. But for VBAC after 2 cesarean, we're like 1.4%. So just barely increase or even less. Again, depending on the study, there's lots of studies out there. But even ACOG themselves, they say it's VBAC after 2 cesarean is essentially just like 1 cesarean. They're around the same. Now, does it get tricky after 2 cesareans? Yes. But let me tell you why. It's because we're not researching. We're not allowing people. And when I say allow, I mean, we're not even giving options to people for VBAC after 3+ cesareans. So we don't have that concrete evidence because it's not being studied very well. And so that's unfortunate. Each cesarean is going to slightly increase chances of things like uterine rupture because we are cutting into our uterus multiple times. We're then getting more scar tissue, things like that. So it is going to increase slightly with each cesarean. But even then, it's also a personal choice. It always comes down to personal choice, in my opinion, because we know people who have gone on to VBAC after 4 cesareans, 3 cesareans. There's 5 cesareans even on the podcast. So know that, yes, it does increase your chance a little bit. And after 3 cesareans, the studies are vague. There's not a ton of evidence. And you're more likely going to find that it's not safe for people to VBAC after 3+ cesareans. And again, it comes down to the lack of support that you're likely going to find within the provider world. And let me tell you, it aggravates me. It aggravates me so much to see that people just want to go have babies and do have, VBAC after multiple cesareans safely, but we're not supporting them.
Yeah. And some of this leans on, right, insurance and providers being under a certain amount of scrutiny with their insurance or hospital policies or things like that. So understanding there's like a whole side thing that's happening that has nothing to do with the actual safety or efficacy of what they're doing. It's a side conversation for sure.
It really is. In fact, when I was interviewing the many providers that I was interviewing, I had one say, well, if you decide to come to me and you decide to VBAC, this is after 2 cesareans. He said, I'm going to have to sign a letter or sign a form and write a letter saying that you will not sue me because you have to understand I have a family. And I was like, what? But it really did help me understand, like, there's a reason they are restricted. They are nervous because it is a job for them. They do get paid. And there are situations
And they
like that
can
where
lose
insurance
license
doesn't
over
cover
certain
it.
decisions. Exactly.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it comes down to finding that right provider and knowing that, after multiple cesareans, you might have to jump through some more hoops. And it shouldn't be like that, but the reality is that it is.
Yeah. All right, let me hit you with 2 more, and then we'll dive into some other content here. Do most midwives, either in hospital or home, accept most patients who are planning a VBAC? I don't want to use an OB next time.
Such a good question. And this is limited as well. It also depends on your area. So most midwives are able to accept VBAC, but there are certain states that have regulations where VBAC is not allowed for a midwife in hospital or out of hospital. We have some hospitals here where OBGYNs and the team and all of that have restricted the midwives in hospital to accept VBAC patients, even though they're in the hospital and they're overseen by an OB. They just will not let them. And there are a lot of states where if you're going out of the hospital and you've had a VBAC, they won't let you, especially VBAC after multiple cesareans. Sometimes it's like, I can support 2, but after that, it's cut off. My license does not allow me, or the state, whatever, restricts me. So yes, can you go to a midwife? Absolutely. I love midwives so much. I do believe that they have a different style of care. We do know that there are midwives where they're a little bit more medical minded. I know that's like a nickname. I don't know if your podcast listeners are familiar with that, but a midwife is like
I've
a medical
said it.
midwife.
Yep.
Yeah, that are, just more medical minded and not going to be as open and understanding of physiological birth. But yeah, midwives do usually support them. And, I would say check with your area, start interviewing. One of my biggest tips too is interview providers before you're pregnant. It is so important to do so because you are in a whole different mind frame and there's different hormones and emotions and you're just in a different space. And so go and interview those providers and find out if those midwives in your area accept VBAC. And we actually have a VBAC supportive provider list on our Instagram. So if you go over to the VBAC link on Instagram, you can go into our little link tree and find the VBAC supportive list. And there's a ton of midwives on that list.
That's awesome and a great resource. So thank you for including that. All right, last question, and then I'll have everybody, you can tell them where they can find you and how to connect with you and all that stuff. But what are some of the best ways that you felt you were able to start mentally preparing yourself for that VBAC?
Yeah, it started with that op report, getting those op reports and have a deeper understanding of what was going on. So that, and then mentally preparing is really the education. I got the education and I was like, I know I can do this. This is so possible. And then I created a space and I also accepted that some people didn't fit in my space. People who I love so much and are in my daily lives just couldn't be in my daily life and in my space then. And that was okay. And it really helped me mentally prepare because I wasn't getting their constant static coming at me of, oh, what's going on? Or why are you doing this? Or is baby going to be okay? Or what if this happens? I actually was asked by my mom, like, will you forgive yourself if your baby passes away or you pass away? Like, those were things I didn't need because mentally it was spiraling me. And then I also needed to be in safe VBAC groups on Facebook because I did find myself in a VBAC group that was not safe, did attack me, and it helped me spiral quick. So mentally, you have to protect your space. You have to learn the facts. And I think between that, like, it just fills you up with armor, and it fills you up with faith and trust. And, if you're a person of God, or you're a person of faith, I think that is another really great place to tune into.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, thank you today for your really interesting, really awesome, redemptive stories that you had to tell. So much education, I think, happens just from hearing other people's experiences, the good, bad, the ugly, the amazing, So with that, though, I do want people to be able to connect with you and learn from you. So will you share all the places that they can find you, please?
Yes. So you can find us at the VBAClink.com. And if VBAC is a new term to you, like it was at one point for me, it is spelled VBAC, not VBACK. So the VBAClink.com. And then we're on social media all over at the VBAC Link. And on our website, we have our blog, our How to VBAC course, which for your listeners, I'd love to offer a 20% code for some like a specific VBAC course at birth 20 if they want to. And then the podcast, you can search any platform that you have, the VBAC Link, and you will find hundreds of stories of people who have come before you with similar situations, more than likely, and have gone on to VBAC and have better experiences after cesarean.
Well, thank you, Meagan. You are a wealth of information, and it's just fun to have you here and connect with you again. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.